to the RISE World Summit 2024. We do hope you joined us at the release of the RISE values: responsible, inclusive, sustainable, and ecosystem friendly, the foundation of all that we do and believe at the RISE World Summit and beyond. The values also bind the 7,500 strong community on the platform right now from over 65 countries, participating in 150 sessions, with us being co-created with 120 partners from around 30 countries. Truly an ecosystem that is value-based and value-driven. And of course, co-creating value. We are truly pleased this morning to have TCS as our thematic plenary partner on CSR on this very critical topic: unlocking India's future transformative policies for a prosperous nation by 2047. As you will obviously know, 2047 marks the centenary of our independence, and therefore truly a vision and a milestone to look forward to. And to move towards that vision, I have with me some of the most brilliant minds who were involved in the CSR legislation and who drove significant CSR initiatives to create impact on the ground. Mr. Balaji Ganapathy, Chief Responsibility Officer, TCS; Mr. Prabhat Pani, Executive Director, CISD at SPJMR, ex-Tata Trust and ex-Tata Administrative Services. We also have Samyukta Samadar, the Commissioner NCR to the Government of UP, and ex-Special Advisor SDGs at NITI Aayog. And finally, we have Dr. Samir Sharma, Chief Executive on SDGs to the Chief Minister Andhra Pradesh and former DG and CEO, IICA, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India. Unbelievable combination of a diverse and yet very, very powerful combination. Thank you and welcome to this session. To begin with, as we said, we are looking at this transformative vision. And to chart such a vision, you need deeper insights and wider perspectives. And therefore, I'm going to request Balaji to set the context for this critical quest that we are all going to get onto and take us through what he thinks is the way forward, but perhaps first to reflect, because I often say that we need to sometimes reverse to move forward. And so, Balaji, may I please request you to do that? But before that, let me of course, share a little bit about Balaji. Balaji Ganapathy is the Chief Social Responsibility Officer for Tata Consultancy Services, or TCS as it's well known, a global top 3 information technology leader. Balaji's mission is to harness the power of purpose, people, and technology to advance access, equity, and inclusion across society. His paradigm, something that I truly resonate with, purpose is the new tech, has been featured in leading podcasts like Purpose 360, Purposing, Common Impact, Brand on Purpose, and other publications like Real Leaders. And I think as a real leader, Balaji, we're looking forward to you to leading this conversation. Over to you.
Thank you, Karen, and it's such a pleasure to be here today. Thanks to all the esteemed panelists for their participation and time and thoughts today. I think it's a very befitting topic to take the opportunity to introspect, retrospect, and then look ahead in terms of the opportunities that lie ahead. I think India is at the cusp of a great opportunity. Right? We have celebrated 75 years of independence. We are marching towards our first 100. And if you look at it from an economic perspective, in the last 10 years, our average growth rate has been compounded annual growth rate has been average about 6.2%. This year, I think GDP is going to be close to 6.6%, right? So It's a very, very healthy, one of the best in the world in terms of overall economic growth that is being driven in the country. It also is important to reflect on the contribution of CSR to the space of growth. And if you look at it, the numbers show us that 10 years ago, about 66,000 crores were spent in CSR efforts. Not all of that from institutions, right? High net worth individuals, philanthropy, retail, all contributing to that. Today, about 108,000 crores a year is being spent on social impact, of which about 26% is being contributed by CSR efforts through corporate entities, right? So this is another thing to look at, that it is one way to look at the kind of contribution that companies can make, which is the financial capital. But in a minute, I'll talk about other forms in which we should think about it as well. The final point is that during this time, the government is also spending on a social impact through delivery of public goods, through social welfare schemes as well. And that is also an important metric to think about when you think about the role of social impact and collective impact through public-private partnerships, right? Which is that the government has 10 years ago spent about 8 lakh crores in social welfare efforts, and today it is about 22,000 lakhs, right? So there is a 300% increase in the government spend also when it comes to the kind of impact that you can create on society. And CSR efforts are only about 1.3% of that kind of money. So the government, of course, is going to be always the biggest entity that will create impact in society. And the other stakeholders that we have, whether it is companies, philanthropy, government agencies, NGOs, I think organizing ourselves so that we can improve the efficiencies of what exists and bridge gaps, especially with the focus on marginalization and inclusion, is, I think, an important lens to take, right? So from the broad perspective and narrow perspective, these are some thoughts I thought I would start with. Now, if you look at it in terms of the reflecting in the last 10 years, there is no one way of showing impact of the work that CSR, social impact organizations, have done. It's very difficult to disaggregate from the complexities of what is going on. There are a few reasons for that. As I just described, the amount of money that we are talking about that has gone into CSR may look very high on its own, but compared to the overall amount of money that has been spent by government and other agencies, I think it is just a small portion. That's one reason. The other reason is the kind of diversity of areas that organizations have taken up because of the opportunity to create impact across various areas. 17 SDGs and 169 goals. And even if you look at it from that perspective, you could spend years on any one of those sub goals and just start to move the needle over a 10-year period. Because these are large-sized problems that one has to look at from a very aspirational perspective to take on. Right? So size and scope of problems that are being tackled in this space is one of the reasons we are not able to, I would say, if we are true to ourselves, see the kind of impact on the CSR front. The other is that having a concentrated focus across multiple years or multiple you're going to go after, and you're going to come together. So I think with these as the context, I would say we are in a good place because we have 10 years of lessons to reflect on. We have economic data, we have social progress data, we have data in terms of contribution of different organizations, and we have some evidences in terms of what impact looks like. And I'm sure my fellow panelists will definitely dwell on this from what is good and bad in terms of what has happened. But I am a very practical optimist. I believe in looking at large problem statements and how organizations like us can make an impact. And that's what I want to end with, that financial capital is only one aspect of solving problems that face society. More often than not, it is innovation and technology that can make a huge difference. So I think having conversations like this is a great start point, because instead of jumping into solution mode, you can understand insights in terms of what are the problems that we are trying to solve. Each of the problems, it's like it said, if you're taking planetary goals and looking at the impact of climate change, there are 10 ways you can skim that or more for India. And even if you disaggregate that at a urban, semi-urban, rural, there are 10 more types of permutations and combinations that you could possibly look at. So I think deriving insights in terms of what has worked well is a good place to start. And I think that's forums like this help with that. The wisdom of crowds, in terms of what maybe Prabhat has learned, what Samyukta has learned, what Samir has learned, what our collective knowledge is going to be always better than individually efforts that each of us are going on. So I think that's a great place to start collectively here, as well as wider in the country, having more conversations like that and looking at collective wisdom. And then looking at a few areas that we can make big bets on in the next 10 years. And I'll come back and talk about it later. I think we are a very aspirational nation. One thing that I see today, growing up in India in a small, lower middle class family, aspiration was all we had. That is what allowed us to reach out for the opportunities that were ahead of us. Today, last 3 days I spent in Jharkhand and some of the remote parts of Jharkhand, and it doesn't matter where you go in India. And you go to rural India, you go to the tolls and the villages, the same kind of aspiration exists among young people, among the population. So how to harness that aspiration and come up with large, big bets that India can make, or groups of people can make, I think will move the needle in a significant manner. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts as well as others' thoughts on it as we go ahead. Thank you. And that's how I'd like to frame my opening. Thanks again
Thank
to everyone for joining this conversation.
Great. Thank you very much, Balaji. I think you're absolutely right. Harnessing the aspiration, and India is now thinking big. Every single person, right from the rural and the unreached to everybody at all, and on the global stage. And I think that's really what's going to take us towards that vision for sure. But we need to harness it, and then how do we harness it? I think is really what we want to talk about today, right? Also, you spoke about innovation and technology, and we're definitely going to talk about that. And of course, data, because economic data, as you said, there is data, social data, there is impact metrics, and we're going to touch on all of these because this is going to be crucial, not just to understand what are we doing and how we're doing, but also how we're going to create impact at scale, as you said, big bets. So thank you, yes, for setting that context. And we are going to move ahead and talk about the three key things that we talk about at the Rise World Summit in almost all our sessions, which is really to talk about challenges, capabilities, and then, of course, collaboration, because we want outcomes, right? We don't want, like you said, conversations are important, but we need to take those conversations forward. And so we're going to talk about that. And for that, I'm going to come to Dr. Sameer. Dr. Sameer, of course, as you know, is the chief executive on SDGs to the CM of Andhra Pradesh, but also has been the former DG and CEO of Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, of course, Government of India. And I think, your experience, as you say, has been really one of kind, because you've been the member of the Corporate Social Responsibility Advisory Committee and the Business and Human Rights Committee set up by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. A very obviously deeply involved in the CSR mandate when it got started, right? What has been that journey like, when you first got involved in charting it as part of the Companies Act and CSR got mandated? I am sure there have been a lot of challenges you looked at, but coming now with this view in the rear view mirror, what do you think has been some of the highlights that you can share with us of that journey? Dr. Sam.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Balaji, and thank you for inviting me. And I'll again, Karen, I'll follow your framework of 5 C's. I have how much? 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Tell me, then I'll do 3 minutes.
Sure, please
Okay.
go ahead. Yeah, yeah.
So, I'll tell you what. The first is from my experience in Ministry of Corporate Affairs in making those amendments to CSR in the last 5 to 6 years. And the second was, so this we can call the zoom out vision. The other was the zoom in, completely the ground level. And in this, two ways. One is as a practicing CSR person now, right at the village, even at the ward level. And in the IICA, we used to provide what we call lifelong or a life cycle services of CSR, which meant right from company policy making to needs analysis to real-time monitoring, finally, highly quantified impact analysis, and also SROI wherever required. So this is the background from which I'll be telling you what has come out of all this. That is the zoom in and the zoom out. I like zoom in, zoom out because in the end, I'll tell you about the framework. There was one famous professor of UC Berkeley. His name was Amitai Edziani. Amitai Edziani prepared this wonderful framework called the mixed scanning approach, which consisted of, as Balaji said, the big things and the small things, And he, incidentally, was one of the persons who got the fastest PhD in Berkeley, 18 months. And this mixed scanning approach is a very popular model in public administration to make decisions in development administration. Okay. So let me reflect on what has happened. And I'll largely be talking about the zoom in levels. Now, first, there has been growth overall. A lot of much more money is being spent. And there has been a role and an impact in the fields of education, entrepreneurship, employment system. There has been a big impact, particularly in health, education, and rural development, where nearly the maximum money has gone. What we are seeing from our evaluations and from practice is the CSR projects have been small scale, they have been disparate, they have been ultra localized, and we are not sure about how long they'll be sustained. This is what's coming out of our evaluation. How long the effects will last. Now, this is what we found in the context. So I will now try to convert these challenges into opportunities when I end my discussion now. The second thing about capabilities, including measurement. Now, it's important, which we have learned in development administration in government in the last 75 years, that if you don't satisfy the real needs of people, you don't know what you'll achieve. When you put money into a system like India, something will happen, but you just don't know what are the intended effects and what are the unintended effects. Something will happen. When you measure, some change will be there. But was it in the direction you wanted? Was it to the extent you wanted? That will not be sure. So needs, so address the real needs. Second is real-time monitoring. You see, real-time monitoring, first of all, it ensures that you do things in time, but it more important allows you to make during the course changes based on feedback. See, it's very important. We deal with what are largely called wicked problems. It's extremely difficult to develop a perfect model to deal with issue. Therefore, real-time monitoring is extremely important. The next is impact, including sustainability, has to be measured. And wherever you cannot really measure ROI and boards have to be told what's happening, SORI is a good fit. So this is about the capabilities. Finally, collaboration. Let me briefly tell you the history of collaboration. Very interesting history. In India, this development program, which now CSR is doing, started the Community Development Program in 1952. The purpose was, like the Meiji Restoration in Japan in 1869, to help improve the efficiency of agriculture so that labor could go away from agriculture and then it could go into manufacturing, and thereby lead to development. That is the development model which all the countries have followed, right from US, UK to China now. So that was the first time CD program was started for agriculture, and the blocks were made, and now, as you all know, the BDOs come from that. 75, a shift happened where the government really went hands-on into this through a plethora of programs under Garibi Hatao framework. Finally, in the 90s, with India opening up, we found that programs were not working. They were not delivering the way they were supposed to. Just putting money doesn't get the results in this scenario. Therefore, we brought in the practices from corporate sector into public administration. So you had stuff like citizens charters, you have the results framework document, result framework goals, then the corporatization of PSUs, then bringing in SPVs in development, all that stuff came. Now what has happened, there are two trends which are sort of gaining ascendancy. One is the digital electronic governance, and the second is oneness. Now, these are the trends of today. And in this, what does CSR do? 1990s onwards, we were learning from corporates. Now there's an inversion where now corporates are being asked to do what we were doing for the last 75 years and bring their efficiencies which they employ in business to the sector. So you see this inversion that CSR has brought in 2014, and you see how this entire thing has come up. Now, when you do this, and now you have to develop the partnerships. See, to get over the challenges which I mentioned in the first part of what I was saying, a good framework which is there is the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the Sustainable Development Goals are abstract. So now there are indicators in there where you have the national frameworks and state frameworks. So depending on what you want to do and your policies which the board approves, you pick up a few indicators and work on those indicators. So what has to be done? You pick up an indicator that will tell you what is. Suppose you have to reduce anemia in pregnant women to 13%. So pick up that indicator. If suppose the board says our focus is anemia, so focus on that. After that, focus also on the space. You cannot reduce that throughout India. And as Balaji was rightly saying, your big brother is the government, which is spending 90% plus, and you all are spending less than 10%. So have the SDG framework. Then the next part will be, in that, develop a model of implementation. A model of implementation as like you prepare a business strategy. You pick up an area, how to capture the area, how to take a product. You also simplify the reality into single variables. And incidentally, when Rath and Dandekar coined this poverty levels based on wheat, there was another economist, Partha Dasgupta. And at that time, he said, what is this, this MDGs, so many indicators, so many goals, give us one indicator. And you know what he said? He said, you pick up the life expectancy as 1 year. That sort of subsumes everything. It will subsume prenatal, postnatal, health care, education, it'll income, health, everything. So for you, one omnibus idea or goal would be the SDGs. Now, finally, I'll just say what are the learning we have from the zoom in, zoom out approach. First, so this policy should be a mix of top down and bottom up. Top down, what your company wants, and the bottom up is what I've explained to you. Now, the bottom up, furthermore, pick up a small geography. Planning Commission reviews in 1970 showed do not de-link resource outlays from geography. This is what they had done for 30 years in India. Planning Commission 1970s, a review showed. Next, bring all the entities together at this level. My biggest task, even with Chief Minister's office, is to make the ANM, who looks after women in child, ANM talk to the ASHA worker talk to the revenue guy talk to the public health at the village level. to make them talk to one another, share information, share learnings, and change responses. It should be focused and targeted. The finer the indicator, the finer the geography, more likely you're going to make an impact. Have a real-time monitoring. Do not have weekly. It has to be real-time with apps feeding information daily, and this being monitored to make immediate changes. Human beings are so different when you generalize, and they behave differently also. So please take that into account when you do it. And the RTM, the real-time monitoring, provides. And we used to do for a lot of companies. And whatever I'm saying has been done. So I'm just trying to sort of generalize from what can.
Sure, sure.
And from this real-time monitoring, we had what is called a feed-forward framework, where you do an evaluation and change mid-course. And last, do an impact evaluation. Make sure it has addressed the needs. You'll find first needs analysis and addressing is a big disconnect between the two when you do an impact analysis.
Correct.
This is what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
I'll sort of
Sure. I think you gave me a perfect segue to bring in Sangyuta, because if you give me permission to go ahead,
yes,
yeah.
please, I'm there. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Yeah. So Sangyuta, but first let me of course say a little bit about you, because I think you are synonymous with SDGs, right? I think it starts also S and SDGs. So Sangyuta Samadar is the commissioner, of course, NCR, Government of UP, and has been the ex-special advisor for SDGs at NITI Aayog, right? Sangyuta is an officer of the Indian Administrative Service with over 2 decades of experience across development administration, policy making, planning, and financial management. Sangyuta, you have been really at the forefront when the SDGs really started getting integrated into our efforts at NITI Aayog, who's of course the custodian for SDGs, right? And you really spearheaded that development with the SDG localization efforts and looking at, most important, the monitoring systems, which just now, in fact, Dr. Samir also spoke about, right? That how have you all developed the national indicators, both at the national level as well as at the state level, tracking the efficiency and effectiveness of social impact initiatives on the ground, so that we can really leverage technology and data, right? So this has been from the SDG effort. Can you please share a little bit about that work that was done? Really seminal work.
Thank you so much, and a very good morning to all my co-panelists, my senior Sameer sir. It's absolutely a pleasure to be back on this forum, sharing experiences on our work on how the SDGs got localized in India and how we are doing as a country and even as a world platform. So a little bit on what you asked me, our basic work over the last 6-7 years in NITI Aayog as the SDG focal point was largely to make these global goals, which are very interconnected, with the 169 targets, which span across, which are very measurable, monitorable, and also which span across the human and social aspect, the industry, economic aspect, and also most importantly, environmental aspects of development. So making these entire global set of goals from the global to the national, further to the subnational at the states level, and also going beyond, to more of the granular level at the level of 700 plus districts. I think that was the body of our work in SDG localization, and that we did through, creating those very dedicated institutional structures apart from the planning ministry or the let's say the finance ministry, which would bring in a whole lot of convergence. The second thing was obviously to, as Balaji cited and Sameer sir very detailed he cited, developing a very robust monitoring and measuring system. Because, in India, we firmly believe what gets measured gets done and the rest of it goes to the back burner. So developing that monitoring system with robust data, with granular data, with high frequency data, and then showing the results, and these results leading to triggering of action at the highest level. I think that is what was the entire game plan of devising a monitoring system through the SDG India Index, and further down to the level of the districts and so on. And obviously the challenges of capacities would include convergence challenges, working in silos of all departments, the statistical challenges, understanding that entire shift from inputs and expenditure to SDG outcomes, to the broader outcomes. So I think that was that capacity driven approach. I think that was one of the main areas. And the last bit definitely is to understand for any government that the government cannot alone achieve these ambitious targets. It's the private sector with its hold over innovation, over capital, over employment. I think they have to really step up this entire efforts, step up the entire game to be able to achieve the SDGs for any society, for any country. Having said so, just globally, if we see, we had the stock taking of the SDGs in New York in the SDG summit last year. So only 15% of the 169 targets are on track. 48% are off track, severely or moderately. And 37% of these 169 targets across these dimensions of development are, in fact, we are regressing. And if you see the SDG financing gap, it's at a mammoth $4.4 trillion. Largely, 2.2 is only in the energy transition area. So if given these numbers, I think this is the time now that we make the legal frameworks that we already have in India. India and globally, we have the UN, the GRIs, the Global Responsibility Indicator Framework. You have the UN principles on business and responsible business and human rights. Then you have the entire set of, MCA incorporated, the national voluntary guidelines on responsible and sustainable business. I was part of that committee when we were able to integrate the entire, the 17 SDGs into the BRSR framework. And I think that was one of the biggest achievements, that somewhere we were able to create a system of disclosure for companies, which would, a voluntary disclosure system, which would not merely focus on, resource efficiency, because this is just part of it. Resource efficiency, circular economy, all that is fine. But along with that, you bring in the ethical governance, you bring in how you are impacting your entire value chains through ethical and responsible sourcing. How are you kind of addressing gender equality in your entire corporate system? So these are all the principles, decent work, economic growth. So these principles were brought in the entire framework. But now what we see as a challenge, I'll just talk a little bit beyond the CSR, because CSR is definitely 25 to 20,000 crores of rupees being spent on different sectors of the SDGs. But how does one go beyond that and see value in this entire system? See, the value has to be seen by the industry itself from within. It's not the government which can kind of, make these things mandatory. And then it gets limited to, let's say, the top 500 companies, listed companies. So how does one understand the value in it? Because the value lies not only in terms of, in addressing your environmental concerns, your environmental impact, and your responsibility towards the community wherever the business is working in, but also there is a huge economic value to it. Now, if here I'll talk about the entire taxonomy of industries, which has been, put forth by the European Union. So imagine when European Union sets forth a taxonomy, which is largely a green taxonomy, and says that all industries across the world, they have to subscribe to that, they have to adhere to it, and they have to kind of, measure up and do their disclosures as per the taxonomy system, in order to achieve that, that global tap into that global pool of investment which is lying. And this is where Indian companies miss out on a big way, because if we see how Indian companies have been integrated into the global value chain, is just 1.98%. So we were just doing a kind of a report with NITI Aayog. It's like 1.98% is the integration of Indian companies to the global value chains. And look at what we are missing out. So the voluntary sustainability standards, which is, different for different industry. Now, industry is not a homogeneous whole at all. So you cannot say that one set will apply to the entire industry. Having said so, that taxonomy, we are trying to develop now, a taxonomy which is not merely a green taxonomy, but we integrate the ESG part of it, the environmental, social, and governance part of it, the SDG part of it in the taxonomy, largely to ensure that the Indian corporate sector gets very thoroughly integrated into the global value chains, because that is where, which will take us to a $5 trillion economy in the near future. So that is one aspect of it. And secondly, also, this entire aspect of how companies find a value in terms of integrating the SDGs in their core operations. Just let's think beyond the 2% of CSR for once, and think of how we can, do less harm. Certain industries, the cement industry, I'll not name it, I mean, the heavy engineering industries, how can they do less harm in certain areas and do more good in certain areas? I think that's the kind of framework that, as a platform, Karen, we need to talk about, in terms of there are tremendous amount of challenges in terms of measuring the impact of that 25,000 crores which goes in yearly, but going beyond as to how does one make ethical conduct, responsible sourcing, and in our core operations and across our value chain, so that we are able to integrate ourselves and tap into that huge growth prospects that's lying there. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta. I think, yes, the SDGs are absolutely critical. And, as we were discussing yesterday, that the new SDG report that has come out really shows that the promise of no one being left behind is very much in peril, right? And that we need a rescue plan and an acceleration towards this. And therefore, the role of CSR becomes even more critical. And who better to talk about that than Prabhat Pani, right? Who has really been a part across sectors in his various roles right through the years. But currently, of course, the executive director at the Center for Innovation and Sustainable Development at SPJIMR. He's also been at the Tata Trust and a Tata Administrative Services. Mr. Prabhat, when we talk about development, more often than not, as even what Dr. Samir said earlier, it's too small, it's too disparate, right? The impact is just not sustainable. So, what do you think? What are those kind of crucial policies and programs that are required to really have impact at scale? Because that's what it's going to take, right? Scale. How are we going to do that? And sustainability. And also, when you talk about the SDGs, as even Sangeeta just mentioned, there are some SDGs, and this is pointed out in the report as well, which perhaps have even greater spillover effect in terms of its impact, in the interlinkages among all the SDGs, whether it is education, entrepreneurship, employment, sustainable livelihoods. All of these are so critical for us to achieve the vision that we are looking at. So, what do you think? How do we measure the impact of these policies? What do we need to improve in the implementation of these programs?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you to TCS. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this extremely important discussion. The first thing is I would like to just quickly go back and talk about the fact that even though Balaji shared these numbers of what CSR is doing and what the government is doing in terms of social sector spending, I just want to reiterate that against the 9.6% of GDP that was spent on these social sector interventions by all players in the year 22-23, the NITI Aayog says that it needs to be raised to 13% if we are to have any chance of meeting the SDG requirements by 2030, which is nearly 1.5 times of what we are doing currently. Now, clearly, this kind of additional resources are not going to come from the government. And it is also not going to work if we continue to do what we have been doing all this while. So clearly, there has to be other sources of funding which are required. But even more important, the models of future growth have to be different. And some of this was alluded to when Samyukta spoke a little while earlier in terms of what corporates could do and how they could look at their roles differently. If I were to say And just carrying the same logic forward, I think the first big change that has got to happen for organizations and CSR organizations is to be far more comfortable in engaging and working with the government. You cannot work with communities without the tacit approval of the government. And even though from the business side, the maybe some of the experiences in the past have not been very positive, which has led to a certain wariness in dealing with the government, there is no way by which you cannot work with the government if you have to make impact at scale. The second big one I would say is that this whole piece around innovation and technology and what Samirji also spoke about in terms of the inversion, if those are to be brought into the social sector, it has to be the corporate sector which is using this for business. They have to help and work with the government in making sure that they work equally well. And do not forget that the scale and the impact when you are dealing with a state or you're dealing with a district or you're dealing with a country as a whole is so much larger than what a business would be able to do in terms of the products and services that it is offering. I would say that if this model were to be looked at in the sense of more active participation and linkage to government programs, not as vendors and suppliers and consultants, but as active partners in the process of design, planning, and monitoring national priorities, the picture could change quite dramatically. And the opportunities are huge. Just look at the range of national priorities there are, and I'm just citing a few. The Poshan Abhiyan in nutrition, which is all around nutrition and food, tackling the high incidence of non-communicable diseases such as diabetes, hypertension, which opens up, again, multiple areas of possibilities. Doubling farmers' income, roll out to the new national education policy, which is bringing in a completely different way by which education is intended to be rolled out going forward. All of these provide huge opportunities, as I said, to actually design, plan, and monitor. But more important, it will actually open up business opportunities going forward. One has constantly been hearing this refrain about working in silos, including a couple of my fellow panelists talked about this earlier. I think there is a very definite intention, even on part of the government, to actually move towards a more holistic approach. I can just cite one example. If you look at the formation of the Jal Shakti Ministry, this was an amalgamation of multiple ministries and departments, such as water resources, river development, rural and urban drinking water and sanitation, Ganga rejuvenation, and so on and so forth. And in that same area, the National Water Informatics Center, which originally had information coming out of multiple agencies, central, state government, river basins, and all of that. We are putting all this together into what is called the India Water Resources Information System. Now, these are things which are very much in the domain of actually corporates. And if they were actually to work with the government, this whole process of looking at things in an integrated fashion, in a holistic fashion, trying to understand how either taking a set of actions in one area, in one activity area, or not taking action, as the case may be, how that is impacting the other parts of the system, this would really come to light. And I think this is another huge opportunity area where non-governmental folks can actually come together and make sure that the interventions, whether at the level of the government or at the level of a CSR or whether at the level of philanthropic organizations, is done in an integrated manner, as well as it is done in a fashion which gives rise to the highest efficiency and effectiveness, clearly leading to savings both in time and cost. I think the last area would be co-creation of interventions, which is kind of linked to the earlier point that I mentioned, where two or more constituents from different stakeholder categories can actually get together. And I'd like to cite two examples here. There was a program called the Internet Sati, which was actually a program taken forward by Tata Trust, working with with Google. And this was not the CSR funding. This was actually Google's marketing funding, which was used. And over a period of 4.5 years, 300,000 villages in India were covered. 33 million rural women, for the first time, got to understand what the internet is all about. And look at the kind of impact it did when subsequently connectivities were improved and device costs came down, because one large segment which was not part of the digital revolution was actually brought in. The other example I can cite is something which Samyukta is very familiar with, the aspirational districts initiative of the government. In the very early stage when it was designed, there was work which was done by organizations like Tata Trust, the Gates Foundation, who actually worked with the government to help put this whole structure together of using sampling, using regular sampling once a quarter to actually figure out what really was happening on the 5 different areas which were being measured across the 112 districts, aspirational districts that were. And today you can actually go to the NITI Aayog site and get a real-time check about what really is happening in those 112 districts, whether on financial inclusion or on water or on health, on skill development, etc., etc. And there is a continued process of identifying the best performers, giving them rewards, identifying those best practices, getting people to actually get exposed to them, field visits and the likes of them. I think these are things where there is a huge, huge opportunity of actually different stakeholders, whether it be the corporates, for-profits, whether it be non-profits, whether it be philanthropic organizations, of course the government, and subject matter experts coming together and creating interventions which are more holistic, which have a deeper understanding and insight into the problem, and therefore the solutioning is of a completely different quality. But the solutioning does not remain with just rolling it out. It's a constant process of monitoring and evaluation to be able to do a check and make mid-course corrections where need be. And at the end of it, of course, doing a proper objective assessment that the impact has actually been achieved.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhat. I think, everyone here has spoken about policies, have spoken about monitoring and evaluation, about indicators, etc. So I'm going to come back to Balaji. Balaji, if we are going to get onto this quest and achieve the vision that is such a transformative vision that is being put in place by TCS, what do you think are the kind of policy and data interventions required? Because without data, right, monitoring and evaluation, yes, but that data has also got to be looked at, has got to be analyzed, has got to be kind of taken forward in a way that can be used for decision making, and not only at the topest element but also on the ground. How can we get data across? So can you please share some of that can catalyze the public-private partnerships and, of course, what we want in terms of long-term impact?
Thank you. Thanks to all the panelists. I think such amazing wisdom that we have heard today. The zoom in, zoom out. I like what you said about the model of looking at big and small and putting it together, Samir. Sanyukta, I think the whole approach to sustainable finance and the role of that in a just transition, I think that's still being understood by most of the world. And I like why you pointed out the intersectional nature of this DGs also. So that's something that is a lesson that a lot of organizations are yet to understand, that you cannot just work on climate without addressing maternal and child health, for example, or address climate change issues without addressing the most marginalized communities where the impact of climate change is the most. So thanks for that. And Prabhat, I think the examples that you gave in terms of what has worked and using that as a platform to look at not reinventing the wheel, but look at those as insights, I think was very valuable. So to me, I think, see, data is there. Data is, I don't think we have to go commission 10 more studies. There is good data that is available. I think authentic data that is being updated on a regular basis at a national level and at a district level is available, right? NITI Aayog's, for example, what we do when we look at it is the panelists are very right. I think companies have to do in their core business what they can do to create a better world. That is given. To me, I call it the principle of carbon negative and social positive. Every enterprise has to do that. You have to do work in a way that you are not negatively impacting the environment and people living in the environment around you. Not only that, carbon negative also means that if you have innovation and solutions that can help contribute to that, you have the responsibility to open source a lot of those solutions, especially countries in the global south or marginalized communities within India have get more access to it. The social enterprises get more access to those innovations, and it doesn't take a lot of money or 30 more years for those to get in the hands of the people, right? And social positive is basically, in the end, the way you operate, you conduct yourself as an ethical business, a moral business, a business that serves customers and others. Are you creating a positive impact on society as well? So it's an integrated approach. It's not like, okay, do you do all of this and then you do CSR? So it is an integrated approach, and the Tata is, of course, very blessed to be part of an organization that has done it for 157 years. Now, data, as I said, is there. So if you're looking at it from a CSR perspective, which is one of the key conversations we are having today, as a CSR leader, what I look at is who's the addressable market that I am here to serve, right? There are 1.4 billion people. I can't serve all 1.4 billion people, right? Whom am I best suited to serve against the interests that I have and the capabilities that I have is the first question I ask myself, right? So that pretty much narrows down. If you take people who are 1.25 lakhs per annum or less, there are roughly about 196 million people like that. If you're taking economic progress or economic outcomes in terms of 5 lakh or less annual income, household income, there are about 732 million people like that. So I think data is there to inform us in terms of narrowing down whom you want to serve. These are still big buckets, but within that, you can say that, okay, if I want to work today, for example, 47% of all the money spent in CSR is in 5 states, right? So, do I need to continue contributing to those areas, or can I pick up issues which are large and need sustained support and focus on those? So, as a leader, as a practitioner, I have data and tools available in my hand to make that decision and say, okay, if you want to serve where the need is the highest and marginalization is the most, then here are the pockets that are available. Look at the 112 aspirational districts, or look at the data, the MPI data that, again, the NITI Aayog has published, and understand at a district or a block level, what kind of different levels of marginalization exist, right? When you're seeing poverty from income, from standard of life, from health, from education, all of those parameters are available. So it is upon us as CSR leaders to construct that, and then say, zoom in and say, over a 10-year, 5-year period, what is the impact that I want to create? Have a point of view in terms of what is the impact you want to create. And one of the examples Prabhat shared, let me pick up on that and say, if you take, for example, education can have a catalytic effect on overall economic growth and progress of the nation, quality of life of people. Then the NEP is already providing the foundation. But how do you translate NEP into bridging the gap between what exists in education today and preparing young people for the future of opportunities that lie ahead, right? To be better citizens, to be good entrepreneurs, to look for better careers by learning good life skills and 21st century skills. So you have that kind of a data as well as policy framework available, but we need to dig deeper into what is working today, what is missing, and what is the role that you can play as an organization what can you do if you create a factor of X leverage, right? How can you create incremental or exponential change by organizing yourself with government, with other agencies who are already working in this space? And all you need to do to make this kind of impact happen is eat humble pie, not have yet another initiative to say that my name, my company's name, my uh, effort is going to get recognized in the public. Look at it in terms of what is the impact you want to create, who is already doing the work, what are outsized gains that you can make if you really focus on that next 5 to 10 year period, and then start creating portfolio of programs and projects that can work against that. What often, again, data tells us that today there are out of 14,500 companies that have reported their CSR efforts.
Uh, Karen, if I can make a quick point to add
Yes,
to what
please.
Balaji was saying, I
Yes,
feel
of course.
digitization can make a huge difference.
To
I mean,
create
I'll give you an example. The government is currently
Can you hear me?
working on a stack,
Yeah.
which will
I'm
provide a
sorry, I think I dropped
Yeah,
off
I
in
think,
between.
Balaji dropped out. So, Prabhat was just giving us a one-liner on the technology, so digitization. Maybe just complete that and then we come back again. Yeah,
saying that
sure.
it's digitization and building digital capability in, if one were to look at the social sector, in small NGOs, which will actually make a huge, huge difference.
Sure.
And I was giving the example of the agri stack, which is going to digitize and give a digital identity to every farmer and to every field.
Sure.
Look what this would do to the agri sector. But if people are not familiar with the digitization, how would they ever be able to avail of it?
Absolutely.
So digitization and building digital capability would be one big area to focus on for everybody.
Great. Thanks.
That's
Thanks
a
so much,
very
Prabhat.
valuable comment. And so I'll sum up what I was saying is that organizations, companies can look at CSR efforts as that 5 to 10 year horizon and look at a portfolio of things you want to do. If you want to address education and your strengths lie in mentoring, providing resources, teacher capacity building, infrastructure, digital access. So those are only parts of the value chain that you're impacting. But those are very important parts of the value chain because it will have that outsized impact, right? So stay committed to that over a 5 to 10 year period, work with the board to do that, but then identify projects that contribute towards that. So that individually your projects may seem like smaller efforts that is maybe not moving the needle, but if you cluster it and look at it over a period of 5 years, you know that you have worked in these adjacent areas and overall in the market that you want to serve, the specific districts or blocks that you are working on where depravity is there and need is high, you will certainly see that you are moving the needle. And that is how I want to say to eat this elephant is at a bite size, one bite at a time. And the aspiration of a large India is going to be achieved like that. One toll, one village, one district at a time.
Thank you so much, Balaji. I can't believe we've actually come to the end of our conversation. That was super quick, but I'm going to just take maybe another 5 minutes more. I'm sure our viewers will love it in any case to continue with this session. But to kind of bring it to a close, maybe what we can do is, and I'll leave it open to whoever would like to kind of take it up first. What is that one aspirational moonshot you think we have to unlock India's future? And that's the vision, right? So how do we do this? Anyone can go first. Shangut, I've never seen you being shy. Go for it.
So one moonshot, would definitely be addressing the challenge areas and the challenge. I'll bring in all the sectors here, which are the challenge areas at this point of time. And the challenge areas are definitely education, as has been rightly pointed out. You could see today's ASAR report. ASAR says that, 25% of teenagers up to the age of 18 do not have the reading skills of a class 2. So where are we going with a student base like this? So addressing basic challenges which the state is supposed to provide at a good quality, so that, people are more and more people have that decent standard of living and are lifted out of multidimensional poverty. I think addressing the challenges of nutrition, health, education, and skilling, and retrofitting the skills from the just transition. And this can only be done through partnership. And that is what I've always believed, that the challenge of localizing SDGs can be met effectively through an honest and dedicated and coordinated synced action between the private sector, between the government who can scale up, the private sector who can innovate and offer good affordable solutions, and the civil society which has reach at that grassroots level, which none of us have. So I think that holds the key to
Thank
this
you.
entire thing. Thank you.
Absolutely. Collaboration, and that's the last C, right? So thank you. Dr. Samir, would you like to give us your moonshot? I'm sorry, you are on mute. Yeah.
Karen, last 40 years, what I have seen straddling in the academic, corporate, and the government, there is no big bang you can do on this. Companies have to sort of understand that there are small incremental approaches which may take a lifetime to complete. And as Balaji was saying, you have to bite small, chew it well, then it will lead to impact. So it's important, and don't think that your money is less. No. See, I'll tell you one more thing, a very sort of a mainstream idea, that money is less. My experience at the ground level, where you put dirt into your nails, money is not a problem in getting anemia out. Money is not a problem in money is not to help teachers to teach. What is a problem which Samyukta was saying? Getting the teacher to school, ensuring that the teacher teaches, and addressing the needs of the child. Now this has to be done. This doesn't require money. Money is fine. I also look after clean air, clean water as Chairman Pollution Control Board. So that's the macro part. Yes, companies require money to put better, electrostatic precipitators and all this. So what the corporate sector can bring is, that efficiency in achieving results, the new models which they can bring from the corporate sector into the sector to ensure that things happen. The most important thing is to make things happen. As I was telling you, my biggest task is to make the functionaries from village to district to do what they're supposed to do. I'll just end what President Bush was asked on what is your main job as the president of US. He said, my main job is to make sure people do what they're supposed to do as president of US. So this is our main challenge. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I think, it was a great follow through from the bite size to the partnership, and then, of course, to make sure it's impact on the ground. So, Prabhat, your moonshot.
I would say a far higher degree of focus upon entrepreneurship. I think it ticks many boxes. It ticks the national education policy in terms of doing newer ways of getting people more interested in not becoming an employee, but potentially an employer. It takes care of, the whole issue around jobless growth and all that is being talked about. It takes care of a far higher degree of focus upon innovation and technology. And I think that's something which every constituent needs to look at. It would mean that corporate India, for example, would have to be open to having far more internships available for young people to come and work in various areas. It needs to be an openness to say, maybe we should support some startups and examine the possibilities of doing things differently. It would mean rather than just having a separate arm of the organization kind of looking at entrepreneurship, focusing far more on intrapreneurship within the organization. I mean, I'm not saying these are not being done, but I think it needs to move to a much bigger scale. It cannot be restricted only to a skill startup India and a digital India and whatever else. I think those are great initiatives. They are having a lot of results. But if you are able to bring in entrepreneurship, I think it changes the whole picture. You are making a person able to not only take care of himself and his or her family, but also being able to take care of others by providing them employment opportunities going forward.
Thank you so much, Prabhat. And so, Balaji, we come back to you to close because we really have gone over time. But I think the discussion was so great that I did not want to stop it. We are talking about India's future. We are talking of a prosperous nation by 2047. We've heard some of the moonshot by each of them. What do you want to say as a last word to make this really, really a next step to move forward from there?
I think taking action day in and day out and realizing the value of each and every step that you take. Most of the time, I think this is a thankless kind of sector, right? Because as most of you have shared, we make progress, but the size of the need and the size of our aspiration is always going to be 100,000x of the progress that you make on a daily basis. But I think that's where the lesson of the person who is putting the banyan seed comes into play, right?
Let's just give it
You're only
Balaji. Okay.
to have gratification, delayed gratification, I think we would achieve quite a lot. I think the ideas that the panelists have given are tremendous. I also myself believe that the aspirational India is the answer to India's problems. Young people, especially in rural India, are the answer to the problems that we face today. If we empower them with the tools and the techniques and the ideas and the resources to make a difference, they can solve for all of the existing problems that we have, and we won't leave anyone behind. So, with that practical optimism and a desire to sow the seeds today so that the benefits can be reaped 30, 40 years from now, that's the sentiment that I want to take away from this session.
Thank you so much. They say the most profound advice is probably the most simplest statements, and it's no more true than what we've just heard from all four of you. I also want to say when I started, I said I have the most brilliant minds on this table right now. But I want to add to that and say that I have the most brilliant minds with the most compassionate hearts. Because I think the thought about really leaving no one behind, which is encapsulated in the SDGs, come out so strongly in each and everyone's thoughts today. I think it's really clear that we want impact on the ground. And if we want impact at scale for the nation, then doing it on the ground is the first step. And something that, Balaji said, I think bite size, beautiful. I mean, how do you eat an elephant? Bite size. Absolutely fantastic. As I said, profound, advice to really take us all forward. So once again, I want to just thank each and every one of you. I want to thank all our viewers who have joined us. I want to thank all our members on the platform because I'm sure this is going to help them to take their plans forward and take us towards 2047, a year for us, which will really, really be something to look forward to. Thank you once again, and thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.